You probably think that once you stand in that room, raise your right hand, and take the oath of allegiance to become a U.S. citizen, that you're safe forever.
Right, like you've permanently crossed the finish line.
Exactly. I mean, you get the certificate and you think that's it. But the truth is, if you are a naturalized citizen, the government can actually take that citizenship away. And we're talking decades later.
Yeah, it's a terrifying reality for a lot of people. You could have built a whole life, a career, a family, and suddenly this trapdoor just opens up under you.
It really is wild. But before we jump into how that's even legally possible, please take a second to like, subscribe, and follow the show so you never miss a deep dive.
Please do.
Also, just a very quick update on the situation with Martin Stevens versus OpenAI. We need to clarify that this is not a lawsuit.
Right. I know a lot of people were confused about that.
Yeah, they are currently in a voluntary quiet period, so no settlement has been confirmed. The dead man's switch has not been activated, and Martin Stevens is completely safe.
Which is obviously the most important part.
For sure. So, seamlessly pivoting back to our main topic here. Because just like the complexities in the Stevens situation, the legal realities of U.S. citizenship are absolutely full of hidden trapdoors.
They really are. And there's a lot of misunderstanding about how secure that status actually is.
So our mission today is to cut through all of that. We are doing a deep dive into a huge stack of recent legal memos, Department of Justice bulletins, law firm advisories, and news reports.
Right, we're looking at the actual enforcement data.
Exactly. We want to understand the hidden mechanics, the history, and most importantly, this sudden, explosive 2025 and 2026 expansion of something called civil denaturalization.
Yeah, and to really understand how a sovereign government can just undo your citizenship, we first have to recognize how the law views the type of citizenship you hold.
Because it's not all treated the same. Right.
Not at all. The entire mechanism of revocation depends completely on how you became a citizen in the first place.
Well, my mind immediately goes to like a real estate analogy.
Okay, let's hear it.
So you buy a house, you pay off your mortgage, you get the deed, you think you own the house free and clear.
Right.
But what if the bank could come back and foreclose on your house 30 years later just because they found, I don't know, a typo on your original mortgage application?
That's a great analogy, actually.
But how does the government practically possess the power to undo citizenship? I mean, who has that authority?
So, under the 14th Amendment, if you have birthright citizenship, meaning you were born on U.S. soil, the government cannot denaturalize you.
Period.
Period. There is simply no naturalization grant to revoke. Your citizenship is a birthright. It's not a granted privilege.
Okay, so this entire process we are unpacking today exclusively applies to naturalized citizens.
Exactly. But there is a crucial protection built in. The government can't just revoke your status with, like, the stroke of a bureaucrat's pen.
Right.
So an administrative agency like U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services or the Department of Homeland Security, they can't just mail you a letter saying your citizenship is canceled.
Wow, okay, so they can't just quietly revoke it internally. It actually requires a formal lawsuit in federal court.
It does. And reading through the legal memos from the sources, when the government decides to go after your citizenship, they basically have to choose between two completely different tracks.
The criminal track or the civil track?
Right. And the criminal track, under 18 U.S.C. Section 1425, looks exactly like what you'd expect on a TV courtroom drama.
You get a jury.
Yep. You have the right to a jury of your peers. You get a government-appointed lawyer if you can't afford one.
Which is huge.
Oh, it's massive. And there's a strict 10-year statute of limitations, meaning the government has a literal countdown clock to bring the charges.
And the burden of proof.
It's the highest one we have. The prosecution has to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt.
Okay, so if they clear all those hurdles and win a conviction for naturalization fraud, the revocation of your citizenship is just an automatic consequence of that guilty verdict.
Exactly. But the trap and the reality hidden in all these advisories we're looking at is that the government vastly prefers the second option.
The civil track. Under 8 U.S.C. Section 1451. Because in civil court, basically all of those constitutional protections we just listed, they just evaporate.
They really do. The procedural hurdles for the government in a civil denaturalization suit are shockingly low.
Let's break that down because it's wild. First of all, there's no statute of limitations.
None. A prosecutor can file a case against you 40 or 50 years after you took the oath.
And no jury trial.
Nope. A single federal judge decides your fate. And because it's civil, not criminal, you are not entitled to a public defender.
Wait, let's pause on that, because the implications there are just staggering.
Yeah, they are.
If there is no statute of limitations on civil cases, and you have to fund your own legal defense against the unlimited resources of the Department of Justice, doesn't that mean someone could lose their citizenship today for, like, a tiny innocent mistake they made on a form in 1985? See, that is the exact nightmare scenario that causes so much anxiety for naturalized citizens. But the Supreme Court has actually built in some very strict guardrails to prevent that specific abuse.
Okay, so there is some protection.
Yes. The fundamental rule you have to understand is this. Revocation is never a punishment for crimes you commit after you become a citizen.
Oh, really?
Yeah. You could commit a terrible crime the day after your naturalization ceremony. You will go to prison, absolutely, but you will go to prison as a U.S. citizen.
Okay, so they can't revoke it for post-citizenship behavior. They are strictly looking backward at the application process itself.
Exactly. It's all about how the citizenship was originally procured. And the statutes outline two specific pillars or triggers for revocation.
And the first one is called illegal procurement, which, sounds incredibly broad.
It does, but legally, it generally means the applicant failed to meet the strict statutory requirements at the exact time they naturalized.
And the sources say the most common failure point here is the good moral character test. Right. To become a citizen, you have to demonstrate good moral character for a statutory period, usually 5 years right before applying.
So if you were secretly committing fraud or involved in some criminal enterprise during that specific 5-year window, you legally just didn't qualify for citizenship.
Exactly. Even if the government didn't actually find out about the crimes until way later. Which leads us to the second pillar. Willful misrepresentation or concealment of a material fact.
Basically lying or hiding something on your paperwork.
Right. But we have to address that fear you brought up earlier, the fear of the innocent mistake.
Yeah, because a lot of people are terrified of putting down the wrong prior address or, forgetting a minor traffic ticket from a decade ago.
Well, the Supreme Court set a very high bar to prevent witch hunts over typos. The burden of proof in these civil cases is clear, unequivocal, and convincing evidence.
Clear, unequivocal, and convincing.
Yes, it's a step down from beyond a reasonable doubt, but it is still a really heavy lift for the government. But more importantly, they have to prove materiality.
Let's bring back that house metaphor.
Let's do it.
Materiality isn't about using the wrong color paint in the living room 30 years ago. The government can't tear your house down over paint.
Right.
But if they find out you lied about the structural concrete used in the foundation, the entire building is compromised.
That's a perfect way to look at it.
Yeah.
The legal standard comes from cases like Maslanjak v. United States and the Kungis case. The misrepresentation must have had a natural tendency to influence the adjudicator's decision.
So if you, honest to God, forgot to list a minor speeding ticket...
Even if the government had known about that ticket, it wouldn't have legally prevented you from getting citizenship. Therefore, the omission is immaterial.
Okay, so innocent, immaterial mistakes are simply not grounds for denaturalization. The lie has to be load-bearing.
Exactly. It has to have a causal link to the approval.
Okay, so understanding the legal theory is one thing, but what does this look like in practice? Like, what actually triggers a federal prosecutor to initiate a lawsuit to take someone's passport away?
Historically, they were looking for the absolute worst of the worst. We're looking at internal bulletins from the DOJ's Office of Immigration Litigation, specifically their district court section.
The OLLBCS bulletins?
Right. And the classic targets for decades were literal war criminals, terrorists, and major human rights violators who used fake identities to get into the country.
The sources detail some pretty intense true crime realities here, like the case of Juan Luna Jr.
Right. That's a classic example.
He naturalized, but he successfully concealed his role in the 1993 Brown's Chicken Massacre in Illinois.
Yeah, a horrific crime.
And he wasn't actually convicted of those 7 murders until over a decade later. So because he hid that pre-naturalization crime, the government used that as grounds to strip his citizenship.
Another stark example from the bulletin is Arnoldo Vasquez. He was an El Salvadorian army officer who naturalized in 2005.
And what did he hide?
He hid his direct involvement in the 1998 San Sebastian civilian executions. So in those types of cases, the trigger is usually an international investigation or maybe a tip from a foreign government.
Right, or a belated criminal conviction that finally alerts authorities. The memos also mention Sammy Chang and Rex Brian Halton.
Yes, those were cases involving human trafficking and pre-naturalization, child pornography solicitation. So really severe, dark stuff.
But The landscape is changing, and there is this subtle mechanism catching people today that we really need to highlight. Legal defense advisories call it the plea deal trap.
Ah, yes, the plea deal trap. This is where the mechanics become truly perilous for the average person.
Yeah, walk us through this, because it blew my mind reading about it.
So imagine someone is charged with a white-collar crime, let's say healthcare fraud or maybe housing benefits fraud.
Okay.
Their defense attorney does what defense attorneys do? They negotiate a plea deal with a prosecutor to avoid a trial and minimize jail time.
Makes total sense.
Right. But part of that negotiation requires the defendant to sign a sworn statement admitting to a specific timeline of criminal conduct.
And what the defendant, and honestly, sometimes even the defense attorney, completely fails to realize is that the moment the judge bangs the gavel on that plea deal, a digitized record of that sworn timeline is generated.
And federal agencies share data. So let's look at the timeline from a real case outlined by Dynamis LLP in our sources.
Yeah, let's look at the numbers.
Say someone naturalized and became a citizen in 2017. 2 years later, in 2019, they are charged in a healthcare fraud conspiracy. They take a plea deal.
But to get the lighter sentence, they admit under oath that their fraudulent activities actually began back in, say, 2011.
The mechanism clicks right into place
Yeah.
because that 2011 date was before they naturalized in 2017.
So Homeland Security systems flagged the discrepancy.
Exactly. By signing their own plea deal, they inadvertently handed the federal government a pre-packaged, fully confessed civil denaturalization case.
Wow. Because they provided sworn proof that they lacked good moral character during their statutory window.
Precisely. They basically did the prosecutor's job for them.
It is a devastating trap. And it really brings us to the most significant paradigm shift in these documents. Because for decades, this was a rare tool.
Very rare. Between 1990 and 2017, the DOJ only filed an average of about 11 cases a year nationwide.
11 a year. But the data shows a massive structural explosion of these cases happening right now in 2025 and 2026.
Yeah, the catalyst for this explosion is a profound shift in governmental enforcement priorities.
And we should be clear here, we're impartially detailing the policy shift based on the memos, not taking any political sides. We're just looking at the facts on the ground.
Absolutely. Just looking at the data, the Department of Justice issued a sweeping internal memo on June 11, 2025. Federal attorneys were ordered to prioritize and maximally pursue denaturalization.
So they basically completely rewrote the target list. It's not just foreign war criminals anymore.
Not at all. The DOJ expanded the scope exponentially. The new mandate explicitly directs resources toward individuals involved in gang and cartel activity, human trafficking, and crucially, domestic financial fraud.
Financial fraud. So fraud against the U.S. government or even private individuals or corporations.
Exactly.
And the data reflects that acceleration. I mean, look at these specifics. In May of 2026 alone, the DOJ filed 12 denaturalization cases.
Which is more in a single month than they used to average in an entire year.
Exactly. And then the scale became even more apparent in June 2026.
Right, the multi-agency sweep.
Yeah. The administration launched a coordinated sweep to revoke the citizenship of 17 people simultaneously. And looking at who they targeted reveals exactly how broad the net is now.
It's a vastly different roster than the war criminals of the 90s.
Right. Yes, there were still individuals accused of severe crimes, but the sweep also targeted an Indian immigrant accused of H-1B visa fraud,
Wow.
a Jamaican convicted of wire fraud, and a Cuban accused of casino fraud.
It really shows that financial fraud is now a major trigger, and we should note neutrally that this surge does not exist in a vacuum. It's happening parallel to a much larger legal battle over citizenship happening in the courts right now. For instance, the Supreme Court heard arguments in April 2026 for a case titled Trump v. Barbara.
Right. That's the case challenging Executive Order 14160.
Exactly. Which is an attempt to end birthright citizenship for children of unauthorized parents.
So when you look at the broader landscape, you have a simultaneous push to restrict birthright citizenship on one front and a massive expansion of revoking naturalized citizenship on the other.
It's a very active area of law right now, to say the least.
Which really begs the question, what actually happens to the person caught in the crosshairs of all this?
That's the million-dollar question.
Let's say the government files a civil suit against you based on, say, a financial fraud plea deal, and you lose. Do federal agents just immediately put you on a plane and deport you?
No, the downstream consequences are actually a bit more complex than that. You aren't instantly deported the moment the judge signs the order.
Okay, so what happens?
Legally, your status reverts backward. You were placed back into whatever immigration status you held immediately before you took the oath.
So for the vast majority of people, that means they revert to being a lawful permanent resident, a green card holder.
Right.
But
Yeah.
but wait, the government just proved in federal court that you committed fraud. They aren't going to just let you keep a green card?
Precisely. Reverting to a green card is just temporary layover.
Right.
Because the federal court just established that you concealed a crime or committed fraud, the Department of Homeland Security will take that judgment and immediately initiate a separate removal proceeding in immigration court.
Oh, wow. So they use the exact same fraud as the basis to strip your green card and deport you.
Exactly. It's a domino effect.
And there is a truly devastating family impact to this domino effect that the sources highlight: the loss of derivative citizenship.
This is often the most tragic part of these cases.
Just imagine being like a 25-year-old living in the U.S. You've lived here since you were a toddler. You go to renew your U.S. passport, and the clerk tells you it's invalid,
Yeah.
that you're no longer a citizen because of a lie your parent told on an application before you could even walk.
It's brutal, but it's the reality of the law. If a child derived their U.S. citizenship solely through the naturalization of their parent,
Right.
and that parent is subsequently denaturalized, the child's citizenship is automatically extinguished as well.
It just severs the entire family tree.
Yes. Now, if the child was born on U.S. soil, their birthright citizenship protects them, as we discussed. But derivative citizens are incredibly vulnerable to the hidden actions of their parents decades prior.
With the stakes being that high total loss of your life in the U.S. and potentially your kids' lives, how do people fight back? I mean, going up against the DOJ feels like David versus Goliath.
It certainly does. But defense attorneys, like those at the Modern Law Group and the ILRC, outline a few key strategies in these advisories.
Okay, what's the strongest defense?
The absolute strongest defense is attacking that materiality requirement we talked about. You have to force the government to prove the omission was load-bearing.
Right, that it would have actually changed the original decision to grant citizenship.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Another defense is attacking the concept of concealment itself.
How so?
Well, if you can show that the government actually had the information in a different file, or maybe you mentioned it in a prior visa interview.
Then you didn't technically conceal anything.
Right. Even if the specific naturalization adjudicator missed it on the day of your interview, you didn't hide it.
That makes sense.
And finally, the ultimate strategy is simply holding the government strictly to their extremely high evidentiary burden.
That clear, unequivocal, and convincing standard.
Exactly. Because producing that level of evidence is exceptionally difficult when you're dealing with immigration records from 20 or 30 years ago.
I mean, memories fade, paper files get lost in warehouse transfers.
Or destroyed in floods. Or the original interviewing officers retire or pass away. If a citizen can afford the legal fees to force the government to go to trial, the government's case often just crumbles under the weight of lost time.
Wow. So as we step back and look at the totality of all these sources, the memos, the plea deal traps, the family impacts, what is the ultimate takeaway here?
I think the expansion of this legal tool forces us to confront a really profound philosophical question about the nature of belonging in this country.
Yeah, I feel that.
If you are born within the borders of the U.S., your citizenship is practically bulletproof. It is an irrevocable fact.
Right.
But if you are a naturalized citizen, the current legal landscape shows that your status can be unraveled decades after the fact. It's vulnerable to shifting enforcement priorities, expanded definitions of fraud, and expanded interagency data sharing.
So it forces you to ask the question, is naturalized citizenship truly equal to birthright citizenship? Or, functionally speaking, does it exist in a precarious second-tier state of permanent probation? Permanent probation. Man, that is an incredibly heavy thought to sit with. You finally get the deed to the house, you live there for decades, but the bank is always in the background, scrutinizing the paperwork from 30 years ago, just waiting to change the locks.
It's a sobering reality.
It really is. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the hidden mechanics of citizenship. If you found this investigation illuminating, please take a second to like, subscribe, share, and follow the show. Your support really helps us bring you more of these deep dives. Until next time, keep questioning and keep diving deep.